Terra's Story, Chapter 3. The nightmare, when it came, was a jumble of images and sensations from past and present. She couldn't stop shaking. She gasped repeatedly, struggling for breath, struggling against the arms holding her, until recognition peeked through her panic. Sam. Sam waited quietly, his big arms not a prison but a circle of warmth and protection, except for where the points of his badge poked her cheek. It was a small hurt compared to where the knife had sliced her throat when she jerked away from her attacker, missing by a hair's breadth, severing the artery that would have killed her. She winced with every breath, blood still seeping down her neck. The torn flesh between her legs burned and throbbed, worse than the cuts and bruises from running and falling. When her knees gave way, Sam caught her and carried her to the squad car. She felt him slide her onto the back seat. Then, everything went black. The little girl's blonde ponytail streamed behind her as she pumped her legs to make the swing go higher, faster. The damaged face held no expression. The staring eyes were the milky white of the blind. Blood insulted the tiny purple flowers on her skirt and emphasized the cuts beneath the torn bodice. Terra ran to the swing, her arms outstretched to save and comfort, but the distance between her and the girl stayed the same, no matter how fast or how far she ran. She's dead. She's dead. The taunting voice was crazed and triumphant. She loved the swing. She threw her legs toward the sky, kick just a little bit harder, swing just a little bit higher. She loved the sensation at the apex of the swing, the pause when it hung suspended right before it plummeted backward toward the ground. Higher. You can do it. The pause. The plummet. Once more. You can do it. The rush backward. Oomph! Wait, let go! Stop! No! Please, no! No! Terra twisted violently away from the hands shaking her, screaming, her eyes squeezed shut. Terra! Kale's voice finally penetrated her nightmare fog. She stopped thrashing about, but her eyes were still squeezed shut, though tears streamed from beneath her lids. Slowly her breathing quieted. Only then, when she had lain there quiet and calm for several moments, did Terra dare to open her eyes. Her father's eyes showed the depth of his concern and the depth of his empathy. He said nothing, but simply cupped her cheek with a gentle palm and let his own tears spill over. She remembered then that he was an even more sensitive empath than she, which meant he could feel everything she felt, often see the images she saw. That was why, ultimately, Carl could not live in the city. Too much. He had to live in the countryside where nature and quiet soothed the raw places in his nervous system. Her mother needed the pace and stimulation of the city more than she needed Kala. This was why Terra's parents had divorced. At least it felt so at the time. Terra had grieved the issues between her parents and what it had cost her most of her life, so it was a welcome distraction. Familiar territory with less charge than the tornado ripping apart her insides. But as she gazed into Kale's loving eyes, she came fully present into the moment and into her body, which started trembling again. Kale noticed. Come, sweetheart, wrap that blanket around you and let's go outside. I'll make coffee and we'll let Mother Gaia soothe us both. Terra nodded and carefully untangled herself from the bedclothes. Kale made sure she was steady on her feet, then flipped on the lamp. He watched as Terra eased her way to the front door. Then he headed to the kitchen. The plumeria-scented pre-dawn breeze sent goosebumps along Terra's arms. The bird chorus was tuning up, and the intensity of the darkness seemed thinner. She sighed and settled into one of the rockers on the deck, bare feet tucked into the warm folds of the blanket. Strange, yet familiar. An environment foreign to her current life, soothing because of that, and for its distance from noise and bustle. As she listened, Terra began to distinguish the sounds: frogs by the creek, palm fronds rustling in the wind, distant waves, the sound of a shooting star. Huh? Terra looked up to see its tail, a gold streak against velvet dark. Carl came through the door with a coffee tray just in time to look up and see the comet himself. When he looked back at Terra, he laughed. Heard a comet, did you? He teased. Terra startled. How did you know? How could I? Dad, is that even possible? It happened, didn't it? He replied, still grinning. Did you think that city living had dulled your awareness? No, honey, you still sense across time and space, and yes, of course, it's possible to hear a comet. You just did, right? But it's a different kind of hearing, to sense the movement of a heavenly body, energetically and spiritually. He put the tray on the little table between them. And I had another thought. Have you considered the possibility that things are hitting you harder now because you're growing more sensitive? No, I hadn't actually. I dunno, Dad. I feel more shielded in people-dense environments, so wouldn't that make me less sensitive? Terra shook her head. Whatever's happening, I can't go on like this. I just can't do it anymore. She waited, half expecting the kind of recriminations she regularly heaped on herself. Then don't, Cale replied, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. But that's just one sign, sweetheart. Nightmares, that's the exclamation point to make you pay attention. Terra sighed again and buried her face in her hands. I mumble, FT. When she looked up, her father had a rueful grin across his face. Want to try that again? I couldn't understand you. She sat up straight and reached for a cup of coffee. I said, I don't even want to think about that. You don't have to yet, he gave her a sideways glance. But when we get to Simeona's, they said in unison, as though rehearsed, then chuckled together before settling back in the twin rockers. The creak of the bamboo floor was a lullaby as Terra rocked. As her thoughts wandered, her muscles relaxed and comfort began to seep in. Terra didn't see the light brighten the sky. She had dozed off again. Beside her, Cale sipped the steaming brew and opened his field to connect with the energies around him. Ah! They made a quick breakfast, then piled into Cale's ancient mini-truck and drove past the coconut palms and the pineapple fields to climb the road that followed the cliffs. Terra spotted the fish ponds where Hawaiians had practiced aquaculture, raising fish in the ocean, for 800 years, unchanged, the tides still surging in constant flux. The farther they drove, the better she felt. The energetic cords of memories stretched so thin, all she felt was herself inside her body in a beloved but unfamiliar place. Finally, they pulled up to the edge of a clearing. The sheltering structure of a hall and its vegetable garden stood resolute against the ever-encroaching jungle. Kala climbed out of the truck and began to sing a beautiful chant, asking permission to enter the space. A husky voice sang a response, and Cal and Terra started forward. They were halfway across the clearing when a form appeared in the doorway. Cal paused, put his hands palms together in front of his heart, and inclined his head. Terra tossed her bag aside and ran past him into the arms that opened wide to let her in. Terra found herself swept into a gigantic hug, which, considering Simeona's abundant femininity, made it really hard to breathe. Terra laughed and hugged Simeona back as hard as she could, feeling light and happy like she had as a child every time she visited her dad's spiritual mentor. Here, girl, let me look at ya. Simeona held Terra back a little and scanned her face. Then her brow furrowed and her lips thinned. How'd you get so disconnected, Lilun? This'll never do. Come on in and you tell me what's up. Terra nodded, not trusting herself to speak, but feeling somehow lighter. Simeona had already taken some of her burden, and she felt Cale's hand on her shoulder, too. I'm not alone. The dishes soaked in the sink and the last bit of coffee steamed in their cups, as Terra finished telling Simeona and Cale about the nightmare. I don't know who I am anymore, Terra whispered. I don't even feel the same in my body. It's like I'm on the outside looking in at the same time feeling myself inside. She tried to laugh, but it came out sounding like a choked-off sob. I'm a classic split personality, she exclaimed, but the joke fell flat. Stop that, Terra, Simeona instructed, her authority unmistakable but her voice matter-of-fact, not judgmental. When she looked up to meet Terra's eyes, her own were filled with compassion and understanding. Your consciousness is being stretched, darlin'. You're being the witness, that's your oversoul, observing yourself inside your earth suit. Not the same thing. It's not? I'm not having a psychotic break? Terra wanted to believe Simeona. The older woman reached out worn brown hands and clasped Terra's. No, darlin'. Some folks confuse a spiritual crisis with mental illness, but I'm not one of them. You just don't know how it feels when your consciousness breaks out of jail. That's what actually happens, what they call an expansion of consciousness. It's more like remembering who you are as a godspark, and that you live in lots more dimensions than just this earth plane. It's where you register the information coming from your body and the way it's reacting, how you're feeling, whilst you choose how to be. Like you can be angry but still act kind, that sort of thing. takes a lots of energy to be with what is and choose how to behave. And whilst you're stretching those two ways, other things are changing too, because when your barriers come down, your soul can find more of its ways of knowing. You mean like psychic gifts? Terra wondered. I can see some energy now when I couldn't before. Like at sunset when clouds mute the sun a little, I can see waves of energy radiating off it. Exactly, Simeona confirmed. That proves my point. You feel like you're going crazy, but that's just because your whole world is turning upside down. She grinned, her eyes dancing. That's all. That's all, my foot, huffed Terra. Just my whole world turning upside down. Thanks, Simeona. She couldn't keep the sarcasm from her voice, but Simeona and Kale just chuckled. Every breakthrough has its breakdown to go through first, Simeona emphasized. Terra rolled her eyes and looked at Kale. Seems to be part of the process, sweetheart, he confirmed. I was afraid of that, admitted Terra, but it doesn't make it any easier going through it. But, she paused, thinking, but I do feel a little better, thinking of it this way, and for that, I am sincerely grateful. Now, darlin', let's talk about this dilemma you're in. Simeona always preferred to get right to the point.